Lesson for Cain by amadpainter, aka T.R. Becker. It was dawn on the first day of the week, or maybe it was the last. Carlene did not remember which it was, and really she didn't care. She sat looking down on a small valley called Boundary, where the small town of Green Apple was hidden in the woods. She knew most of the residents, having lived there for the last 4 years. She did not have what anyone could call close friends, but she liked many of the people she dealt with. She stayed there so she could buy as much of the apple honey as she could. Apple honey was famous for some of the honey that they harvested in the valley. The bees in the valley fed on a flower that grows only in the great woods east of the town, which had hallucinogenic properties that were passed on into the honey. Whenever she had a few gallons, she would make the 2.5-day trip to the town of Bridgeport, where she had grown up. She would sell the honey at a good profit, and at the rate she was going, she would only have a few more years and would have enough money to buy herself a small farm. She looked out over the valley to where the great woods began. Many had gone in to see if they could find the plants that the bees fed on, but almost all never come back, and the few that did would say little about what had happened to them. As she led the pony down the path into the valley, she was thinking that this was a little strange. She had walked the path 100 times and could never remember it being so still before. She stopped when she reached a small river that ran the length of the valley. Green Apple was on its banks about 5 miles downstream. She let the pony drink its fill as she sat down and watched the water flow. She loved the valley, but she had her heart set on the farm just outside of Bridgeport. She had grown up in the streets of Bridgeport, more or less, living with her elder grandmother. It was almost as if she raised herself. She learned young how to fight for what she wanted. She was 14 when her grandmother passed away and the debt collectors moved in. When it was all over, she had little more than the clothes that she wore. She was 16 when she got a job as an assistant to the cook on a pony train to Green Apple. For the next 2 years, she saved her money. Then she began to buy and sell the honey on her own. By moving to Green Apple, she was able to buy the best from the farmers before the many traders could. She had a studio apartment above one of the general stores on the main street. She would do deliveries to a few of the farms a couple days a week for the store to help pay her rent. All in all, she had a good deal living in Green Apple, but it was not where she wanted to spend the rest of her life. She got up and went to the side of the path, picked an apple, and gave it to the pony. "There's a bag of oats waiting for you in town, my friend," patting the pony on its neck, and started down the path to Green Apple. She still felt uneasy with the silence. It was as if midwinter and all the creatures were hibernating, she thought. 15 minutes later, she reached the bridge that crossed the river, and before she could cross, there was a rustle in the bushes. She stopped midway as a man came out of the woods running, tripped, fell down into the path. She pulled out her short sword, left the pony on the bridge to have a look at him. The first thing she noticed was the way he was dressed. He had on a white coat that looked not much heavier than a shirt, with a type of black pants she had never seen before. She tapped him on the leg with her blade, and he didn't move. But she was not sure if he was playing possum or not. His clothes were the finest weave she had ever seen. They must have costed more gold than she had ever seen, she thought. After a moment, she rolled him over onto his back. He was about her age and about as tall as she was. He had brown hair that had a little dry blood showing on the right side. She decided that he was out cold, but other than that, he looked fine. She looked at his hands. They were soft, and thought he could not have done any kind of labor in his life. She whistled and the pony came to her. After a few minutes, she had moved a few packs around, making room to lay the man across the pony's back. It took her a few minutes to get him onto the pony. She noticed his shoes then. They were not made from any kind of skin she had known of, but were made of some kind of shiny material. The more she looked at him, the more she thought he did not belong there. He must be from some big city far to the west of Green Apple, and part of a ruling family. But what was he doing here all alone? She took one last look around before starting to Green Apple. The first thing he noticed was the pain in the right side of his head. He kept his eyes closed, but he could tell it was laid out, or it was in the room that he was in. He tried to remember what had happened, but it made his head throb. He laid as still as he could. It seemed to help. After a few minutes, he began to remember who he was. His name was Crawford Crane. Slowly, his memories were coming back to him, but they were full of holes, and for some reason, this just didn't fit well with him. He was a person that always knew what was what, or he thought so. He wanted to reach up and feel the knot on his head, but didn't want to move. He heard a noise. It almost made him jump. He was definitely not alone. A moment later, he felt a cloth rub across his forehead. He had to blink his eyes a couple of times before he could see. There was a woman smiling down at him. "How do you feel? You took a good hit to the head." "What happened to me?" he said in a dry voice. "And where am I?" "As for what happened to you, you ran from the woods and fell in a road. Where you are is in my room." "What city is this?" "City?" she kind of giggled. "This is the village of Green Apple." It meant nothing to him, but thought it should. She helped him take a sip of water. "How long have I been here?" He looked around the room. There was only one bed with a couch and a chair. He tried to sit up, and she wouldn't let him. "Hold on there, not so fast. You took a hard blow to your head. You've been here for 2 days. He didn't fight her. He laid back down and closed his eyes. "The doctor said you should rest a few days before trying to get up, and I think he's right." His head was still throbbing, just not as bad as when he woke up. All this was a bit overwhelming for him. The next time he woke, it was dark out, and the room was lit by 2 gas lamps on the wall. His head felt better, but he still had no idea of how or why he was there. He was alone in the room. The smiling lady was gone. He sat up on the edge of the bed. He was in a nightshirt. His clothes were on the chair, but before he could get up, the door opened. In walked the smiling lady carrying a tray of food. "I'm sure you're hungry," still smiling as she handed him the food. She was right, he was. There were beans of some kind, corn, what he thought was some kind of meat. He found this shocking. No one ate meat. He was not sure how he knew this, but he did. She noticed how he was looking at the tray. "Eat up, you need to heal proper." As he ate the meal, meat and all, they talked. They exchanged names. He told her most just called him Cain, and it was really the only thing he could remember about himself. "I have no way of paying you back for your kindness, or know how, Carlene. Whoever you are, there is someone out there looking for you, and I would wager your family would think you're worth it. That's not why I helped you anyways. If I had left you there, some highwayman would have killed you just for your fine linen." She pointed at the pile of clothes. He had no clue what she meant by that. She really didn't think someone would kill him over his clothes, did she? "A lab coat and pants are not worth a person's life," he said, looking a little bewildered. "That, what you called it, lab coat, would cost a good year's wages here." He could tell she was serious. He was going to need to live, and if it was worth that much, it would help till he could remember where he belonged. There's a pony train coming in 2 days, and I know just who to talk with. Good, then we're partners. Can you arrange for my own room on credit until then? No problem. The third floor is set up as an apartment like this one. The owner hoped to rent to a local, but I'm sure I can talk him into it. She stood up and took the tray. I'll be back in 20 minutes. While she was gone, Cain got dressed, took a look out the window. He could see that across the street was a saloon not far down. There was a few ponies out front. There were a few gas lamps that cast shadows everywhere. The lamps just didn't seem right to him for some reason. He knew there was a better and a safer way. He also noticed that few people he saw were armed or had swords. There were no guns that he could see. In the pocket of his shirt, he found a ballpoint pen. He looked around the room. On a small desk there was a few pieces of paper, a quill, and ink. He started 2 lists of things. One that he could remember, and the second, things he thought that could be improved upon. He believed that with Carlene's help, he could help the village of Green Apple and make some money at the same time. After all, he had no idea how long he was going to be there. For the next 2 weeks, he remembered little about himself, but he did learn about life in Green Apple. Carlene and him had become not only partners, but also friends. With the money they had gotten from the sale of his lab coat, he was able to rent a small shed behind the blacksmith shop, where he began to work on things that could improve life in Green Apple. One of the things that he made was a small gas cook stove with 1 burner that, when shown to one of the diner owners, he was commissioned to make one with 4 burners and a flat grill. Payment came in the way of 10% of the diner's income. It didn't take long for Carlene and him to become a power in the local politics. After 2 months, he still had no clue about his life before Carlene had found him on the road. But they were making a lot of money on the things he improved upon. He was not sure where the ideas come from, only that he knew they'd work. Everything seemed to be going great for their partnership. He was making money, and Carlene had doubled her income with the honey trade. In no time, she would become the richest person in Green Apple. She had decided to build a small hotel and saloon at the edge of the village. It was to be the biggest building in town, a full 6 floors. She believed that when people of Bridgeport heard of the new wonders that were happening in Green Apple, there would be many new visitors, and they would need a fine place to stay, and she was going to provide that. The work was moving along fine, and at the end of the 4th week, Cain and Carlene went to pay the workers who were laying brick on the 3rd floor. The scaffolding was loaded with a couple of 100 bricks, a good 20 feet off the ground. Carlene walked over and yelled up for the men to climb down to get paid when the scaffolding gave way. The men started to yell as the bricks began to fall right at her. Cain stood in shock with his mouth open. There was nothing he could do. She was going to die. He was shocked by what happened next. The scene in front of him froze in place. The groups of bricks just hung in the air, and Carlene stood frozen, mid-scream, hands covering her face. After a moment for his brain to comprehend just what was happening, he ran over, picked up Carlene, and moved her out of the way of the falling bricks. The moment he put her down, everything went back to normal. The bricks hit the ground where she had been standing, then the workers hit the ground. No one had been hurt bad, but they all looked at them with disbelief at what just happened. Crawford Crane would turn 12 next week, and his parents had planned a party. Everyone in his class was going to be there, but now he was not so sure if it was going to happen. He was smart for his age, always being one of the top students in his grade level. Being so, he would get away with things most students could not. So when he was told to report to the principal's office, his teacher was shocked. He took a seat on a hard wooden chair in the outer office to wait. setting his pack on the chair next to him, making sure his laptop would not fall out. He had never met the principal before, so he was not sure what to expect. After a few minutes, but what felt like hours, the door to the inner office opened up. A boy not much older than him walked out, head bowed down, and he thought he heard a sniffling sound as if he had been crying. He went out the office into the hall, but had left the door to the principal's office open. Someone inside cleared their voice in a deep whisper. He heard, "Crawford Cain?" The voice gave him a shiver up his back. He got up, grabbed his pack, and went to the door. And as he walked through the door, he seen an old, bald-headed man behind a big desk. Before he had taken 2 steps, the voice said, "Close the door and take a seat, Mr. Cain." He did as he was told, putting his pack next to his feet. The principal put down his pen, closed the notebook, looked up at him, who was staring at his feet. "Well, Mr. Crane, you do realize there is a need for rules, I hope." He nodded his head. "Good. I need you to also understand that there are rules that are not written or spoken of that need to be followed too." Cain looked up. "Sorry, sir, I don't understand." This made the principal frown. "What I'm saying is that you are expected to follow the rules, but not only the ones that are pointed out to you, but the ones that are not also need to be applied to your life. Example, you know that it's not right to lie to a teacher, but yet no one needs to remind you of this." Cain was a little puzzled, of course. One should never lie to anyone. What did this have to do with him? "Are you saying I broke one of these unwritten rules?" "This, young man, is exactly what I'm saying, Mr. Crane." He interlocked his fingers on the desktop and looked stern at him. "What was your midterm assignment?" "The green apple scenario, sir." The principal nodded his head. "Yes, green apple. If I recall right, the assignment was to make your avatar as wealthy as you could in the time permitted, right?" He nodded his head. "Yes, sir, that's what I did." He rubbed his chin with one hand. "Yes, you did that, but it was the way you did it that is in question. Now, I know that you were trying to do a good job so as to get a good grade, but in doing so, you went about it in the wrong way." But I did what I thought the teacher wanted, and that was to build wealth." He was kind of shocked. "Yes, you did that, but you did it by means you should not have. Even though it's not a written rule, a young man of your age should understand that creating a clone avatar of oneself to help in the assignment was not right." He let that sink in a moment, and then said, "To top it all off, when the AI had noticed what you were up to, the decision was made to eliminate the main avatar, at which time you stopped the program to save it." "But I couldn't let her die," he said a little louder than he should. "Now, Mr. Cain, you do know that the avatars are only programs, and being a teaching program, it's needed to be used over and over again, with new students each semester. We cannot reset the program until the one running has come to an end. Do you understand this?" Cain looked up at him. "You mean she has to die?" With this realization, a tear rolled down his cheek.